Rock on, let's have a party. Rock on, real gone stuff. Can't get enough. Rock hard. Thank you very much, ladies. Now what?
Well, you want to talk about,
All right.
like Big Star, things like that.
Okay.
Well, what's the story behind the third album? There was a lot of turmoil involved in recording that album, wasn't there? I mean, you went into the studio, and is that what caused the breakup, was the recording of the third album?
Shit, no. No, it's just, you know, we broke up after the first album. Really?
After the first?
Yeah, has anybody here ever heard Big Star? We should play Big Star for him before we talk about Big Star is the thing, you know? I mean, we're already playing Alex Chilton's solo records, The Very Wonderful. However, now we're going to talk about a band I used to play with that, changed a lot of people's heads.
Rock writers of the world, a lot of it's a blur. We had meetings. I think we elected like a president.
The whole premise was to unionize, but the real reason for this is they wanted us to see Big Star.
Can't even say that I remember everything about their set, except that, you know, they had a bunch of rock critics dancing, which is beyond a miracle.
They were just unbelievably great.
I remember Cameron Crowe saying that something had really happened, something had really been transformed in him. He didn't think it would be this good. None of us did. It was one of those seminal moments.
103 WZXR Memphis. Morning to you. This is Red Beard. Some of you probably weren't really too much into rock and roll when Big Star was here in Memphis in 72, 73, but they have reached a cult status.
It seemed unusual that you could hear an album that was so incredibly good and people didn't really know the music. It was amazing.
This is Fresh Air. My guest is Alex Chilton. He started his career as the lead singer of the Box Tops, and he formed his own band, Big Star. Many singer-songwriters
And after
have
Chris
been
Bell
inspired by
split the band, Chris went over to England while he was there, recorded a considerable amount of material at Air London Studios with...
It's a strange history. You have to do a lot of explaining of who this band is. All of these people in that Memphis community, it feels like an odd connection and collection of people.
Those couple records are such masterpieces. They're so pristine. And if you only knew that side, you wouldn't know the whole history.
All the problems with distribution and the record not getting out there, they really were kind of on their own island. It's that isolation that creates the uniqueness, you know?
To me, Big Star was like some letter that was posted in 1971 that arrived in 1985. You know, it's just like something that got lost in the mail, really.
It felt more personal to me. It felt like it was your own. It was pretty hard to say you could feel like Fleetwood Mac was your own. Whatever quality it was, it belonged to the world.
There's a sadness to it because those are some of the best records made in that decade, and they just didn't get heard.
Sometimes lack of success forces you deeper within yourself. And that, to me, is the best thing about the Big Star story.
Well, I guess the best way to set up the Big Star story is the 60s in Memphis and what was going on. was, of course, the impact of the British invasion. What had been just a handful of garage bands, all of a sudden, there were bands everywhere.
I wasn't particularly aware that Memphis was one of the places where rock and roll got invented. They would have contests on the radio all the time. Well, you know, who's the best, the Beatles or Elvis? Pestered my parents till they bought me a bass and started playing in a little garage band.
Back in the 60s, there were so many kids, and neighborhoods were such a big deal that you could field a baseball team, the football team, and you could also field a band.
I was 21 years old when we started that commercial studio, and I probably looked to people like I was about 16. There was no reason for those people to think I knew what I was doing. When I was in junior high school, we were making recordings in my house. Every kid was going out and buying a guitar or a drum set or something and starting a band. So we had, you know, plenty of guinea pigs to experiment on, and then we would go and have 45 records pressed, and we'd try to sell them locally, and actually had fairly good luck.
Well, Memphis was a hotbed of recording activity. It was sort of like growing up in Hollywood next door to MGM's studio lot or something. And I was asked to join a kind of successful local band who made records. So it was just something that was easy to fall into.
The first time I saw Alex Chilton, I guess he was 11 or 12 years old. Now, Alex was what I call an art brat. His mother ran an art gallery. His father was a hobbyist clarinet player. Bill Eggleston, the Memphis art photographer, had given him peyote, and he was running around with his eyes spinning like that, you know, his hair sticking out. And I thought, well, this kid's going to have a unique life.
I got sent to Central for 1 year in the 10th grade, and Alex was in my geometry room. And I noticed that, you know, Alex, he's not here today. And then the next geometry class, I said, it's not here again today. You know, what's going on? And, you know, where is Alex, you know?
Give me a ticket for an aeroplane. Ain't got time to take a fast.
He says he was 15. I think he was 14. The second time he ever sang in a microphone, he recorded the letter. And as they say, you know, the rest was history.
Stax had been re-equipping their studio, which before 1966 it had very primitive equipment. And we happened to buy our mixing console and our first multi-track recorder from the same company. So almost immediately, we started to get all of the overflow work from Stax. So instead of recording high school bands, we were recording Booker T and the MGs and Isaac Hayes sessions. It was a little daunting. You know, if you wanted more staff or more engineers, you had to train them yourself. I actually set up sort of a little recording school at the studio. And when I walked into my office, there was somebody sitting behind my desk in my chair with their boots up on my desk, smoking a cigarette. I said, who the heck is this?
Chris and I were at MUS, the best boys' private school in Memphis. What they wore and the music they were into, he very much rebelled against it. And I kind of picked up on that. We were interested in how to get the textures and fuzz tones and how to sound like Jeff Beck or Jimmy Page.
You know, if somebody went through the recording school and we thought they were doing some pretty good music, we'd give them the key to the studio and say, when it's not being used, you can come in and record your ideas. Chris was not so much an electronics guy as he was a sonics guy. How do we get this piece of equipment to get this sound that I've got locked in my head?
Jimi Hendrix had happened and the Yardbirds were happening. And I remember when Chris and those guys played in the school cafeteria, I was like, wow, you mean, here's some of these guys that are really actually out trying to do this stuff. Chris and I just sort of hit it off because we were interested in these same things. We were pretty inseparable in those days, you know, because we actually lived with each other at college.
I was sort of an audiophile, and I had stereo equipment that was better than most people had, so a lot of times people would wind up in my room. A really curious thing, Chris always had a full-body purple aura every time you were doing acid. We all would say, "Ooh, what is this all about," you know? Andy and Chris had sort of convinced people that they were expert drug tasters or whatever. I think, you know, they were pretty high most of the time.
People talk about 1968 and how affected they were by it. I probably played 250 dates in 1968, and all the things that happened, I could only look over and kind of nod and say, okay, that's happening, but I didn't have time for it.
He came back a very different person. I remember we were in the living room of his mother's house, and he had on the wall a framed gold record for Cry Like a Baby, and the label had peeled off of the 45 record and was laying down in the corner of the frame like a dead bug. Alex really liked that.
Chris and I came back to Memphis, and we had both had our fill of going away to college. No car, having to live in a dorm room, can't play music, no place to develop your pictures. You know, it was really a drag. So Chris and I started working on Chris's back house, and we got what musical equipment we had and moved it back there and started playing a little bit. So we said, well, we need a drummer. I said, oh, well, I know this guy, Jody Stevens, who I played with back in the 9th grade.
When I was a teenager, I felt like an oddball. Music was something that made me feel like part of a community. Chris and Alex and Andy and John Fry, and it's a society of oddballs.
Alex had already made enough money that his parents had put it in some kind of his trust fund, and went out and bought his own car and drove it around, and who was kind of surviving off being or having been a professional musician, which was a big mystery to me. How can anybody do that? Surely you don't make money doing this. We're just doing this because it's cool. You know?
When you smile, you make
Alex's life was so far off the chart, no real pun intended. While Chris was having to clean out the pool on Saturdays, I think he felt like such a victim because his father made him clean out the pool. We would stand out in front of the old building over on National. Well, what do you want to do now? Well, you know. Chris would say, get Alex in the band.
Chris was very, I think he knew what he wanted in terms of band members. And he had this pretty specific idea about what this band would sound like musically and how all these pieces would fit together.
Should I use this mic? It's hooked up? I still don't hear myself through the phones.
How about now?
Yeah. Whoa! And which way should I be standing in relation to this mic?
In front of it?
We had sort of weaseled our way into Ardent a little bit, and we actually were allowed to go into the studio late at night.
Starting to put down No Kiddin' reel tracks. I even think we got our very own private, full-blown reel of tape. We'd just been using scraps up till then.
Can I put on some backup before it's late? I'll do the piano.
over a year or so, 2-3 nights a week. Chris and I guess Andy would come in too, and we'd come in and do the overdubs and the rewrites and the singing and that sort of thing.
Got a light?
They're over there. The bands I'd been in prior to Big Star didn't have access to a studio. And that very beneficial time of evolving as a musician and being able to do that in a studio. Once you step into that and kind of discover what you can do creatively, I don't know that there's any kind of feeling like it.
We should have done When My Baby's Beside Me acoustic. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Very quickly, we became sort of an organic thing. We jived with each other. We bonded.
A little less vocal and a little bit more guitars, a little less of the other vocal.
The focus was original music. Alex and Chris were creating music that was as relevant and connected as emotionally to me as all this cover material that I'd been doing.
Those two were like a couple of comets or shooting stars or something like that. Jody and I were kind of caught up in the bow wave of Chris and Alex.
Tell me when.
Yeah.
I didn't get to hear much Big Star music because they usually wouldn't write in the studio. When they showed up with the first songs for #1 record, they basically had the arrangements completely together the way they wanted to do them. They came in, they set up as a 4-piece band in the studio, everybody playing on the basic tracks simultaneously. And that was the first time I was hearing those tunes.
Rolling.
Years ago, my heart was set to live. Oh, and I've been trying hard against unbelievable odds.
Sitting down to go through Ballad of El Goodo, it seems like we'd run through that song one time, and then the next time it just all clicked. It was pretty much realized the way you hear it on the album.
Even just hearing the tracks, the 2 guitars, the bass, and the drums, I said, you know, if they've got any lyrics that are halfway decent to go with this, we've got something. Al Bell at Stax came to us and said, Stax would like to have a rock brand. Would you be interested in having Ardent Records be that brand? I said, well, of course. Chris knew that that was coming. I told him, I said, you know, if you guys get a good album together, we've got a good vehicle, I think, for putting some of this music out.
I can't get over how really nice and Mellotron sounds on that.
This one wouldn't make a bad single, probably.
I think the name Big Star was just desperation. We needed to have a name, and nobody could think of a name. And when we were sitting out in between the old shack on National and the actual storefront studio, smoking, I don't know what, smoking something. And there was, of course, the Big Star grocery store right across the street.
You know, we could have been jinxing our future by calling ourselves Big Star and our first album, #1 record. I do remember feeling really uncomfortable with the name because it was so pretentious.
Do you want me to do that?
I would normally turn most of the overdubbing to them because Chris could engineer plenty good enough. You know, I had other work to do. I wasn't particularly anxious to be there 24/7, so.
Before all that got too awfully far along, the move to Madison Avenue occurred, where Art moved from their little storefront on National Street over to this big, wonderful new studio. They just did everything technically that you can imagine doing, and there's still studios to this day, I'm sure. Don't light a candle to it.
I felt like I'd walked into the Disney world of music at that point.
John Fry likes toys and equipment and things like that, so we had the first Mellotron in the United States. We had George Harrison's keyboard. It'd come in for service and been swapped out, and so we ended up getting his Moog.
Ardent provided a real high-tech environment. And when Stax started doing really well, there was an overflow of business.
I think Terry did the Staple Singers one, which was a great record. So that kind of work was going on over in A Studio, and we sort of staked out B Studios, our own space. Big Star just spent a lot of time in there finishing up that first LP.
I had a little bit of an attitude back then. You know, when I would walk to the room and I would hear them working on something, you know, they struck me as a little amateurish. You know, I already had it in my mind what something would end up sounding like, you know, if Brian Wilson has got his hands on it, or Phil Spector, or George Martin. I remember hearing #1 record after it was mixed and just being floored. Just floored.
It's 9:29 on WMC FM Memphis. And speaking of Big Star, a couple of members of the group are here. Andy Hummel and Alex Chilton are with us. A lot of excitement about this album. Is the album out yet in the stores?
Yeah, the album should have hit the stores today.
#1 record is the very first from Big Star, and you won't forget, will you?
Here it is, only January, and you're getting an awful lot of critical acclaim for your new album.
Yeah, that's nice. I hope it sells.
We got great review from Cashbox and Billboard and Rolling Stone. That was looking good.
In a way, the Backhouse crew moved over to Ardent, and I was part of that crew. We shot some film, we all loved music, and we'd hang out together. And then I was asked by John to do the Ardent advertising.
It was pretty exciting, especially getting the album. Great front cover that Carol Manning shot, and the back that I think John Fry actually wound up shooting that.
Chris persuaded John that I needed to be aboard because we were all going to be a success. And if I couldn't be in the band, I needed to be there. And with my college radio experience, he would like to have somebody focusing on Big Star all the time.
Chris was a master manipulator, and I wanted, something to do, and so Chris found me as a willing participant.
Would you say that Ardent was a family?
Yeah.
Tell me about the Ardent family.
Bizarre.
We've got a big new studio here. We're a real company. We're not operating out of anybody's backyard anymore. We've got a big label behind us. Yeah, you're damn right there were expectations. I realized that it was a matter of probabilities, but for Chris, it was 100% certain that this thing was going to all take off.
After all these years of just listening to music and just looking at the covers and studying everything about a Beatle cover, it was like a dream. We were so fortunate to have landed in this spot doing this that I think we kind of thought, well, this is how life is.
Savoy Brown will
not be able to appear. Now, Friday, August 25th at the Auditorium, plan to see Cactus, plus Rory Gallagher and special guest stars Blood Rock. Tickets are $3.50.
When our record came out, nobody in Memphis took any notice, just because we weren't heavy, which was what everybody had to be in those days.
I worked at Pop Tunes from 1970 to 73. On every other aisle in the store were 2 record players, so people could listen to the music. Saturday afternoons, there'd sometimes be everything from John Lee Hooker, you know, to Led Zeppelin and Ray Conniff, all blasting at one time. Ardent and Stax naturally always got preferential treatment. When Big Star showed up, I mean, I even remember where it was on the floor. It just didn't look like a Memphis record. Big Star came out of the gate with a kind of finely tooled precision.
The whole time we're promoting Big Star, Stax is sending over posters of Isaac Hayes' Hot Butter Soul. Totally distracted towards where this big acceptance and these big sales were coming from. But that's just a microcosm of what was going on in the whole industry. All the resources get put behind the big sellers, guys that have the potential to become the Elton Johns of the world. I make 50 calls a day to radio program directors, and they'd say, well, you know, if you got any records in the stores yet? I mean, we're not getting any report of any sales.
What's going on? You know, we've got all these great reviews. Stax seems behind it. The record's great. What is going on out there? And that's out there is such a netherworld. You know, you don't know what is out there.
You know, we were all frustrated picking up Rolling Stone magazine, and it says, this is the greatest stuff we've ever heard, and, you know, nobody's buying it, and you can't find it in a record store.
People would call from different parts of the country and just say, wow, where can I find this record? I just heard it on my local radio station.
At some point, a decision was made that we really needed more promotional help, which in fact is probably not what we needed. Probably what we needed was distribution help. But John was brought in on a retainer and hired to sort of coordinate the promotion effort.
It was like they kind of needed somebody to beat a drum and light a fire. I got through to more people when the Argent record, Hold Your Head Up, when that was out, because when I'd say Ardent, they thought I was saying Argent. Oh, yeah, so Al Bell wanted to have more of a presence in the pop market or the white market or whatever you want to call it. But I never got a sense of how they planned to forge a beachhead in the pop or top 40.
There was always a band. So I would be lugging around my 15-year-old, 14-year-old brother with amps and PA systems and what have you. #1 record was being recorded the year that I was in France when I escaped Memphis. And it was at that time, I remember being home and Christopher played me on his stereo up in his room, #1 record.
Won't you let me walk you home from school?
I'm not ashamed to say, but I cried. It was just, you know, this is your kid brother. And you'd known all these years how he had progressed and what he wanted. And it was like, my God, you've come out with something. I don't know that it wasn't the Beatles, but it was damn good. It was great.
Things started going sour for Chris when he started reading reviews of #1 Record. It was such a large part of his kind of creative vision that when the press started coming back and focusing on Alex, I think he thought he might have to live under that shadow from that point.
Rock and roll is here to stay. Come inside.
I'm sure that was a factor in, his emotional problems that he started having around that time. I mean, the guy, he poured his heart and his soul into this thing, so, I guess he felt kind of betrayed.
Chris is in every way a tragic figure, but you're dealing with a reality and a fantasy. Big Star never had to face the big mirror, of just staring yourself right in the face night after night, trying to pay for the damn bus, So the fantasy, which all starts when you're strumming your tennis racket in front of the mirror, the fantasy was able to grow until it blew up.
If it's so, let me know. If it's no,
Late in the day, he came by the studio and was arguing with me, and he stomped off and left. And I went home, and, I got a call from Richard Roseborough, who was down at the studio, said, Chris is back up here, and he's erasing the multi-track tapes for #1 Record.
My father, with incredible understatement and euphemism, picked me up at the airport around Christmas time of '72 and said, well, we've had some trouble at home.
He apparently took a bunch of pills of some kind and wound up in the hospital. So that was a sad day.
What do you think? 1, 2, 3, 4.
you feel sad, 'cause I got mad and I'm sorry.
I love #1 Record, and I think it's probably one of the most peculiarly sequenced records, because it starts off with all this bravado of feel, and in the street, and it's got these really great, don't lie to me, these moments. And then the record just sort of slides into this kind of melancholia. I mean, Watch the Sunrise is sort of like this last glimmer of hope that sort of sparkles a little bit, right before it just totally fades out.
I can feel it. Now it's time.
By '72, I had started sending reviews in, and I was getting published here and there. So I was starting to get on mailing lists, and I would get the occasional album in the mail, which was very thrilling, to get an actual record album in the mail for free. And I opened it, and that laminated cover with the neon sign, it was a eureka moment hearing #1 Record for the first time. An absolute life-changing moment. I played it, it would end, I'd play it again.
I really remember hearing Big Star clearly for the first time. I was on Salisbury Parkway in North Carolina. I had just gone through the light. Baby Was the Time he came on the radio. I was driving an old Thunderbird, and I started going way over the speed limit really quickly. It was really exciting. Big Star had a song in the top 10, or top 20 anyway, in my hometown, and I thought this was the same all over the world. I knew the people over at WTOB, and the DJs would make extra money by selling their promos of records. I probably bought all their copies for $1, and it meant they didn't even have copies to play, so I probably wrecked the chance of Big Star getting any more famous in Winston.
Okay, Chris left, took the tapes, band broke up, then you were asked to play the Rock Writers Convention, and you went out and kicked ass, and then decided to get back together. That's like the Hollywood version of it.
Well, I would really say the general idea was that, okay, Chris was the main first guy in this band, and you know, if he's gone, then I guess we won't do anything. But the moment when I decided that we would do something more together was speaking to John King. And John said, you know, we did well in a lot of ways with that first album. I think if we do another one, we can really make some success out of it, you know.
Okie doke. These are books which I don't have room for. Oh, Spectre, I loved him. And now these are the Beatles, and then Big Star's got a section. And of course Kiss, which I'll never listen to, but gotta have it. Oh, Sinead O'Connor, I love her. She's so serious, you know. I've got like dance and techno and house in these cases. I'm into hits. I love hits, no matter where they come from. This is the Rock Writers Convention where Big Star performed. I put a page ad in a billboard and then flew in 100 or so of the leading music publication people back then. Rolling Stone, of course, Circus, Crawdaddy, Cream, Fusion.
When you came up with this idea for the Rock Writers, was that a real earnest thing that you just thought they needed a union or something?
Very much so. See, nobody ever, they thought, oh, this guy in Memphis wanted everybody to see Big Star. That was definitely part of it. But no, they needed some sort of organization. Hard as hell to get paid, and nobody really respected them at the time, but they sure do now.
The day before my birthday in April '73, I got this package in the mail, and I just flipped. And it was just, I'm gonna get invited to a junket.
I remember they called Cream's office and said, we're gonna take everybody. And I go, everybody? Cream magazine, we made $22.75 on the weeks that we got paid, like we won the lottery.
What exactly we hoped to accomplish was open to debate, but we all had a ticket, a hotel, and freedom to run around Memphis.
They put us in a school bus, and they made this big deal that we were going to go to Graceland and maybe see Elvis. I remember seeing the gates, you know, with the musical notes, and they came out and said Elvis has left the city. Elvis was not there. I vividly remember looking over, you know, Lester Bangs and Richard Meltzer. The two of them are standing there pissing through the gates at Graceland. And I just thought, if this isn't what it's all about, I don't know what is.
I just sort of showed up for the second day, and they gave me a press pass. And I met Lester Bangs. He was doing so much speed that, and he could barely talk. He just went, mm-hmm.
This is perhaps the most bland time in the history of Western civilization. Now, the difference between this and 1967 is stupefying.
Lester Bangs came out so irreverent and so clever. We never treated musicians like they were any different than us.
There was this sense that the edifice of rock and roll had gotten a little unwieldy. That resulted in records that had lost some passion, perhaps.
In about 1971, that's when I started to really hate hippie shit. I mean, I like radical politics, but I saw hippies as just mainly getting high and let's get high and ball.
I gave my life to rock and roll music. It had been taken away from me just as I was getting old enough to really enjoy it. You know, everything got bloated into heaviosity.
It started becoming more product and less art.
I guess we just felt like we were trying to reclaim that attitude that had been there at the beginning of rock, you know, stripping everything back to where it's all started from, and let's try this again.
I remember there was a meeting the morning of, I think, the second day, where we were supposed to elect the president of the organization and draft minutes for the meeting, but it was anarchy.
It was like that cliche, like herding cats. We didn't want to be organized. You know, our gift was chaos.
The last night, they had a big concert with the acts that were on Arden.
The Rock Writers were just yawning and going, yeah, this is horrible. And then Big Star came on.
The flower that had blossomed, when I heard #1 record re-blossom, they were just great.
As soon as they started playing, all the rock writers started dancing, and Richard started taking his pants off on the dance floor while Big Star was playing. So he danced in his tighty-whities for a while. I had seen Big Star a number of times before then, and they never got that kind of response. No one ever adored them. This hand-picked, perfect audience.
That was really, to me, where we all came together. I still marvel at the fact that Arden Records paid to get 140 rock writers in the same place. Something was forged in that ridiculous moment of a record company trying to organize us.
No one forgot those few days. I mean, not a whole lot of business got accomplished then, but it certainly was a galvanizing point for the whole Big Star thing.
Coming off that performance at the Rock Writers Convention, certainly it instilled a new confidence in me, and my perception is the band had been kind of on hiatus prior to that. So we were all pretty charged about it.
That's a neat sound.
Okay, you're rolling.
Hey, John, turn up the bass in the headphones.
Even before Chris left the band, they had already started writing some more songs. I was glad that the band decided that they wanted to make another album, but things are a little different. Nightclubs and liquor by the drink and bars, you know, you can almost see the geography reflected in Radio City.
I need help, ladies and gentlemen. Rattle my gin.
Memphis did not get liquor by the drink until August '69. There was a great hue and cry saying, this is going to turn the youth of Memphis into degenerates. There's going to be bars on every corner. Well, guess what?
We're having the
Fridays was the cornerstone bar, and you saw some crazy, crazy people who probably, if, say, liquor or drugs or sex had not brought them together, they would never have been in the same place, much less the same moral universe.
Everybody who's in the least bit interested in raising hell would be there. Typically, we were. Oh my God, yeah, we'd probably drop a couple of ludes and then have drinks and we'd go from there, probably to Fridays and then probably to a liquor store and then probably to Oblivion.
When we would party, I mean, where do we go? We go back to the studio because we were having so much fun.
Fry would find us wrapped up in drum blankets on the floor of the studio.
Big Star will be playing at Max's Kansas City from tomorrow through Monday. It's in the city.
Stax cut a deal to be distributed by Columbia. So when we went to New York, it was another attempt to get attention, you know, to meet with the man who negotiated the deal with Stax.
That took a long time to set that up. We had to buy a buku of airtime.
That was a showcase. So anybody that had been in Memphis, any of the New York people, I know I sat at the bar between Richard and Nick.
They were like this reluctant rock band, yet there they were with that ironic name, Big Star.
Those of us that were writing or trying to write about them a little knew that we were going to have to go through the magazine route. Unfortunately, I think to some of us, the prospects of helping somebody get big was not really what we were hoping for. We wanted them to be a tiny band that everybody listened to.
This is taking a bit of a left turn. This is probably the best song to me on Radio City.
That second album to me was just one of those, almost a perfect record. All the songs had a sensibility and a feel and a certain kind of a mystery. This was not a record that revealed itself fast. When you listen to these songs, they were complicated.
You got to feel the emotional depth and angst that was within the band.
I look at Radio City as a transitional record. It's the pristine brilliance of the first record, but it's the beginning of the unfraying and the sound of falling apart.
Those last few chords that Nick Lowe later stole.
When you hear a really great guitar sound that sounds really unique, like even just at the beginning of September Girls, the way the guitar sounds right at the beginning, that sound is it's one of these things, just, it's like osmosis. I mean, it just kind of goes right into you.
September girls, do so much. I was your butch, and you were touched.
I think September Girls is probably as close to a big hit as they would have. It's a good hit. And, the fact that it wasn't on every radio station in America is, the target practice of the music business, Sometimes you just miss.
There is that. You would tag things with city. You're in a rock and roll band, Rock City. If something bad happened, it'd be Drag City and Radio City. We all thought this was a radio-friendly album.
Columbia was going to be our savior, and we now had a real distribution company. But they didn't give a damn about Ardent Records. It was a different game, They were used to dealing in tonnage.
For Stax to get picked up and distributed by Columbia was supposed to be going big time. Well, it's a comedy of errors here, but shortly after the Stax distribution deal, we get word that Clive Davis, the man who negotiated the deal with Stax, is being investigated for improper spending on his expense account, and they fired him.
The offices of Stax here are closed. A lot of other problems have also plagued the firm. The latest came yesterday. A judge declared the firm officially bankrupt.
I was already feeling the pressure of having to make the eventual decision of school or band. Having that decision in my head was causing me to sort of morph away from the band quite a bit. So my departure from Big Star had started back that early. Obviously, Chris had already departed, and Alex, that left Alex kind of on his own, Jody being Jody. And so the boys' club, if there was one, was kind of falling apart at that point.
John Lightman is our brand new bass player. He's only been with us about 3 weeks. And he's a fine man. And this is Jody Stevens back on the drums.
We often played to rooms that were almost empty, and I felt really awful for how disappointed they were in the lack of response that they got. It was sort of chaotic at Ardent, and the future was all unknown. It was sort of in limbo. We had a rehearsal set up there. Jody and I arrived at 2, and we waited and waited, and about 5:30, Alex comes sauntering in, and he says, well, here I am, but I don't have my guitar. What do you want to do? So, you know, that would be a typical day, and then after a while of this sort of thing going on, Alex said to me, my attitude about music is I could take it or leave it.
I met Chris, 75. I was working in CBS Records. He was over with his brother, David, looking for a deal, and there's a guy called John Tobler, who was like head of press there at the time, and I was like the in-house photographer. There was rumour of him working with Jeff Emmerich, and if he could top anything that he'd done with Big Star, it would be amazing, and we were looking forward to it. He was very kind of intense, shy. Fortunate that he had David with him, because he could be the mouthpiece and talk all that business nonsense. John would put David in contact with various people in various record companies. But unfortunately, sadly as we know, that he never got a deal for it.
He was drinking a lot, an awful lot. Steadily, it became kind of more and more depressing. And, you know, I was taking him here and there and wherever to show him something and maybe show him a good time. I can always get inspired by environment. I was taking pictures, and especially of him, because I've always had a dramatic side, was quite aware that difficult times can be translated into great photography, great music. And when he saw that picture, we talked about using that possibly for an album cover. I purposely cut him off just below the knees, and with the background that he had, to make him look like he was kind of floating in the ether.
This road with Bob Dylan, he said, Jim, a man could do a lot of thinking here. And Jim said, Bob, I'm thinking all the time. 10 years before he ever played on Time Out of Mind with Bob Dylan, he told me that we had to get out of the big fancy house we lived in, what he calls suburban squalor, and get to Mississippi and move in trailers, because otherwise Bob Dylan would get the wrong message. The idea of living in trailers, I'd never considered that, but it worked out fantastic. It was our second honeymoon. Oh, my mouth is dry. Jim wasn't interested in things that were real put together or polished, or he was more interested in the forces of nature. Here's a good symbol of Jim's philosophy of art. It's said that the song Dock of the Bay was written on this piano by Otis Redding. We turned it into what is known as yard art, a magnificently manufactured musical instrument subject to the forces of nature. From here to Tennessee. There's one thing I learned from Jim, is that everything is important. You might say, that is the most cluttered room I ever saw. It's his ambience and it's his sonic genius is in here. Jim's background was theater, and he learned early on that a play comes together and very intense and real friendships and enemies are formed that basically only last the life of the play. And he learned about how to be part of a cast of characters.
You made a point earlier that Memphis music is what it is because it's done differently than anywhere else.
People who have made Memphis music in the past wouldn't even have the opportunity to make music other places. From Elvis, from before Elvis, or Robert Johnson.
What happened in Memphis in those years. So much had fallen apart, yet this was coming together in a way that nobody could predict or understand what the outcome could possibly be. It was full of energy, creativeness, and always, always trying to push the envelope. And in Stranded in Canton, we definitely did. That was our scene.
I was stranded in Canton. The revolution! We must have it all, you understand? We see! These art forms must be developed! These art forms must be developed!
I used to go to shows and see Jim Dickinson. I saw Big Star play Alex. He and Lisa introduced me to a social set where there were a lot of disconnected, messed up people, and I felt right at home. I said, I found my social set. There was some sort of thing that happened with this group of people, especially around Bill Eggleston, the artist. The standard artistic equation for that scene was horror equals beauty, beauty equals horror. If, say, something felt terrible, if something sounded out of tune, if, say, something was just wrong, then somehow that could become beauty. Alex, Jim, and Bill Eggleston, all, for me, that's all the same body of work. For me, it's just visual and musical. And Bill thinks of himself as a musician as much as he thinks of himself as a photographer.
I drop in occasionally at apartments. Yeah. Alex was doing kind of abstract Jackson Pollock, so I was sitting down playing. I can easily say that art was much more in my mind than whatever they were doing. Whatever it was.
Jim was a man who respected tradition. He talked about knowing truly great men. These are the truly great men who helped him make the music of the spheres. This was his shrine. The boys and I put him front and center. Jim always said that the part of the recordings that he claimed were the space between the notes. That's where he wrote his signature. And I think of all his recordings, he succeeded in the space between the notes most with Big Star Third.
worked with these other legendary producers and saw that the people who were the heaviest were in fact doing the least. But that's the way you pull it out. It's not your record, it's their record. The producer's name goes at the bottom of the back in the smallest typeface known to man, and that's the way it should be. We all had keys to the studio at that point. Alex would come in the studio in the middle of the night with Lisa, his girlfriend, the muse of the record, whose importance cannot be overstated. I come in one morning and he's got this little evil grin on his face, and he said, well, Lisa and I cut something last night I want you to hear. Okay, Alex. So he plays me Like a Kangaroo, which is, it's just 12-string, acoustic 12-string and vocal. I said, yeah, Alex, that's what do you hear on that? And he says, he gets again with the evil grin, he says, well, why don't you produce it, Mr. Producer? But you could hear how it grew up out of the chaos. That's a space that I don't think anybody had given him before.
A lot of different things about how Alex thought about music were changed by his influence from Jim. Alex would be showing someone a song, for instance, showing them how the guitar went, and they'd be noodling around a little bit. And then they'd hear Dickinson say, you know, we were recording, that's it, we got it. And they'd say, what? I don't, you know, you were recording that? And he'd say, yeah. And he'd say, it was great, great, I wouldn't change a thing.
There was a sense of how do we get to complete spontaneity.
There was a tendency to be kind of sonically deconstructive. It was pretty clear to me that he didn't have much interest in trying to tailor anything to have commercial appeal or to be radio-friendly.
I'm well versed in the walls, the worst, and the windows are most.
I thought it had become an Alex album. I thought it was an Alex album. All of those records, from #1 record through Radio City to the third, Alex was the commonality. He was the common point of all of them. And as they progressed, they became more Alex records than Big Star records.
You know, it became such a different scene at that point in terms of where Alex was going musically, in his personality.
It got painful for John. And he did reach the point where he said, Jim, I know you're not finished, but you've got to mix what you've got because I can't do this anymore.
Hey, child, will you come on down?
The mix is half of the record, and Alex was excluded because he would have ruined it.
Stay clear of the street. Oh, on the wing and on them.
I've worked with guys who are supposed to be the real guys, and none of them are as good as John. He would treat classical cello and sheer distortion equally. You know, they were both equally musical, you know, paint that he was pushing around the canvas.
It really is this amazing reflection of where Alex was at that time and that lifestyle. But whether I wanted to sustain that kind of emotional lifestyle wasn't for me.
What was the lifestyle?
Oh, it was kind of self-absorption and self-focus and drugs and alcohol.
You know, everybody's kind of down and depressed then. You got to remember, our biggest studio customer, Stax, had just gone out of business, also leaving us without a distributor for our record label. And, you know, we were kind of wondering, was Memphis music now going to implode and we were all going to be unemployed?
The band had fallen apart. Alex and Lisa were going through the soap opera that was their relationship. The record was about deteriorating relationships. That's what the record is about.
Nothing can hurt me. Nothing can touch me. Why should I care? Drive-ins and gas, it ain't gonna last.
When I came over here to start working, John was showing me around the place, and there was a humongous loud noise coming out of Studio A, and I was prepared for, I don't know what I was prepared for, but I opened the door, and it was just Chris behind the console, running the tape machine, punching himself in to record and out of record and singing and doing all of it by himself.
He was more concerned about his solo stuff and getting that right, whatever the definition of that is. I know he worked on it forever.
The way that Big Star was presented to me, it was always Alex, Alex, Alex. I didn't realize until I heard Chris's solo stuff how responsible he was for the whole sound of the band.
Chris just lost interest in bands, period, and he just wanted to hear his songs not translated.
He was incredibly frustrated with the fact that he couldn't find anybody at a record company who would support his music. I mean, he went over to England to do remixes with Jeff Emmerich, to get his music in line with something that someone would appreciate. And he wasn't achieving that to the least.
Chris came to a very settled faith in Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior. It made a big difference in his life, and it made a big difference in mine.
Music was still his great gift, and he knew it, and he wanted to do whatever he could with it. But nothing topped God.
For him to sing a song about you gotta give your life to Jesus, you know, it was like, God, Chris, I never knew he had that element, you know?
It wasn't just as easy with Chris as to say, I've been born again, and to live that life, to accept it completely. You know, I think there were things that troubled him, not about religion, but about other aspects of his life that like the two didn't really balance each other out or complement each other.
You should give your love to Jesus. It could do you no.
He once told me, you should do drugs. It takes away your sexual urges. I have a feeling that drugs, and then religion, obviously, had a way of keeping any of that at bay.
There was a part of Chris that to me seemed like a highly combustible blend of whatever substances he was intaking, whatever was his baggage concerning his sexuality, and born-again Christianity. It was like all of this stuff mashing around.
I heard about it. I heard about a lot of that stuff. Thinking back on it, I could see that he was searching, which could explain the religion thing. It could explain experimentation of one kind or another. It could explain drugs, you know, travel, whatever you're searching, you know.
I was sent out on an assignment from the Village Voice, and I met Alex the day he had just moved to New York from Memphis. As I got to the place, Lisa was leaving, and he started crying on my shoulder. This is from the first session we did. He was living up in Little India then. He was very sweet, very Southern. He had a copy of Radio City, and here's some of my music, you know. Despite claims to the contrary, he knew he'd done something.
A guy named Terry Ork Records, said, well, we've got this project, Alex Chilton might be coming up. And this is maybe my second week in New York. He called in and said, do you want to play with Alex? Could you put together a band? Nobody knew what would happen, but they knew that television had gotten a real record deal with a real label, and it seemed like, you know, this is kind of crazy. I've only been here a couple of weeks.
Here's a little thing that's gonna please ya. Just a little town down in Indonesia, Bangkok.
I asked him at one point, why don't you write more stuff like you did with Big Star? And he just said, I can't write that way anymore.
He realized he could write a different kind of lyric. He could write a lyric like Bangkok. That was a witty Algonquin roundtable kind of thing. And I don't think that that unattainable muse mechanism was the way he wrote songs anymore after Lisa.
Punk gave him an outlet where he could get a lot of his anger out from the debacle of Big Star being totally ignored. And I mean, that would create a certain amount of bitterness and anger. And I mean, it was a nice place for that to fit in.
You like punk rock?
Not in the least.
Well, never mind the Sex Pistols then, Byron. Here come the Cramps. Charles Rettieri reports on the rock and roll werewolves from the Black Lagoon.
Alex saw the Cramps at CBGB's and came back talking about it the next day, and he loved it. It was, you know, Memphis, but New York at the same time.
I had heard that it was a performance art project that had gotten a following as a band. They were ghouls, you know, deliberately ghouls.
When the Cramps came here in September of '77, Lux and Ivy and Nick, I mean, they stopped traffic. People would go, what the fuck are you? For me, that was Memphis rock and roll, 20 years later. Not rock music, not retro rockabilly, not punk rock, that was rock and roll.
Olivia and Alex Chilton, well known in the punk world, is producing the Cramps album, not from this old board. This is the board which first recorded the man many consider to be the first rockabilly punk, Elvis Presley.
Well, yeah, I think it makes them feel good to be in Memphis, you know, and down here where all the music that they have collected for so long and liked so much came from.
I just love those up-tempo waltzes.
You know, there were people, several other areas, reaching for punk rock and reaching for a new, you know, aggressive, cutting-edge denial of the past. We were too. But yeah, punk rock was different in Memphis than it was other places.
It was at the Bill Street Blues Festival that Memphis first realized it had a punk in its midst. Alex, are you being punkish on stage? Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Rock hard, the ripples, rock hard, the nipples, rock hard, purple.
I think the Memphis pilgrimage was just the natural thing to do for us at that time because I had met Alex in New York and then Chris Stamey, of course, was playing with him. It was summer, like, let's do something, and the thing we're gonna do is instead of going to the beach, we're gonna go to Memphis. We also had the idea that we were gonna meet Chris Bell. We were gonna try to. We just were curious about him. He was more mysterious because, you know, he sort of disappears in the Big Star story early on. It was like, you know, kind of like hanging out with the Beatles for us, because those records to us were as good as any records on earth. I guess we were probably like, every year got a little more into them in a way, like realizing just how good they were and thinking more and more about like how they did them and stuff. And then, of course, this picture on the back is great because they look pretty cool and they look like they're having a good time, and you have to love Jody's jacket. I mean, you cannot beat that. We had a bit of information about which Danvers restaurant Chris Bell was working at, and we found it and went out there.
Well, Alex told us where to find Chris.
Did he?
Yeah, he said, yeah, he works out at this Danvers in
Like Germantown or something?
Germantown or whatever it was, the suburb. And sure enough, we went out there and he was wearing the little two-corner paper hat and didn't seem particularly glad to see us there.
Well, we passed a note back, you know, from the person at the counter, you know, and he came out looking completely bamboozled, like, you want to see me? And
yeah. Alex had invited us to go stop into the studio because he was having a listening session. He was making an album that became Like Flies on Sherbert. And we kept, like, bugging Chris Bell, who was really reluctant to go. He really did not want to go. And we finally bugged him long enough that he agreed to go. And Chris Bell sat in the corner and was really, really uptight. And Alex just kind of said hi to him.
But we did wind up staying there right after he beat it up.
Oh, yeah. Chris left as quick as he could.
Yeah, it struck me those two probably hadn't seen each other in a long time. And it was perfectly cordial, but it wasn't exactly comfortable.
Yeah, it was.
And so we were the enzyme there, I guess.
Yeah.
And I felt a little bad about it later because I hate to have thought that Chris thought we just wanted, you know, to get to Alex. Because Alex was sort of the, I mean, it was a little bit of the Lennon McCartney thing. There was a magnetism that Alex always had, and I'm sure he felt that, you know.
Little fool, are you learning anything in school? Maybe you
This is anti-music, is that right?
This is an anti-musical environment. We'd like to do, the Pantherburns would like to do one more tune.
Wait a minute. That may be the worst sound I've ever heard come out on television. The loveliest pictures.
Thank you very much.
That's what you want, though, I'm assuming.
Well, the best of the worst. It's just
You're
art
really
damage.
very bitter, aren't you?
I'm not bitter about anything. I get exhilarated by this kind of music.
Why don't you introduce the band members to us?
This band is Pantherburn, and we have on synthesizer Eric Hill, Ross Johnson on drums, Rick Ivey on trumpet, Axel Chitlin on lead guitar, and Gustavo Falco on guitar and vocals. We would like to do one more tune, which is a rock and roll tango.
Gustavo, we're not quite ready for it, okay?
Okay.
We're going to take another break here on Straight Talk, and we'll be back to the studio in just a moment.
There was Muddy Waters, there was the Rolling Stones, now there's the Pantherburns.
They're in the same league?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we're obviously underground.
Home of the brave,
It was art damage. That was the concept, to perform, entertain, and to provoke.
I thought that part of rock and roll was gone. I didn't think really you could do anything that would truly be offensive. And sure enough, you could, you still could.
I think a lot of people heard Big Star Records and then heard the Panther Burns and were quite disappointed, to see me playing with such a crazy sounding group, A lot of people didn't understand what I was trying to do.
I felt he had consciously distanced himself from Big Star. There was this syndrome where, when Alex is involved, you create something that's beautiful, and then the next phase is to destroy it.
So Alex told me that Chris Bell had this crazy song and told me he'd mixed it with Jeff Emmerich, and I started hearing something about it. I don't know if I got much of it. It was mainly just Alex said, it's a great song, you ought to put it out. Alex was like, sitting here, and he said, it goes like this. Every night I tell myself, I am the cosmos, I am the wind, but that don't get you back again. And then Alex just like laughed. And he thought that was so much like Chris. Like Chris had written the perfect Chris Bell line. I'm the Cosmos would never have come out without Alex wanting me to put it out. It was the song, it was the perfect anthem to him. It was a big deal to Chris.
Every night I tell myself I am the cosmos. I am the wind. But that don't get you back again. Just when I was starting to feel okay, you're on the phone.
I remember being at SHU a few hours after Cosmos was mixed, and I thought, oh my God, that's where Big Star went. This just picked up where what I loved in Radio City, and this just went here.
It was somewhat overwhelming to me, It was really beautiful, but I was so distracted by the musical aspect of it, I didn't really get the lyrics until probably the second or third time that I listened to it.
I Am the Cosmos, there's a brilliant song for you. Somebody who's just so full of ego and so full of himself, he just thinks he can control the universe, but nothing he can do can get this one thing that he's lost back to him.
I put it out on my label and sent out review copies, and I always felt like the world changed a little bit. Maybe it's because the song is called I'm the Cosmos, but never sold many copies. But it made Chris Bell very happy, apparently.
I never heard I Am the Cosmos while he was alive. Yeah. So, but I can just speculate on that. Well, I mean, I don't really have much I can say about that. I mean, I can sense the pain. That's what's painful for me to listen to.
I
records I like have a lot of yin and a lot of yang. You know, I like for things to be, you know, kind of the way batteries work. I like the idea that Cosmos would be on one side and Sister would be on the other.
You say my love for you ain't real, but you don't know how real it feels.
Chris's voice, he's pushing against his limitations, and sometimes he sounds like he is one breath away from evaporating in front of my ears, you know?
Hold you. Your sister says that I'm no good. I'd reassure her if I could.
Alex's genius happened because he could so carelessly throw things away. And I can tell that Alex is probably just tossing his lines off, but there's something about the way that the two of them sing together on that take. Half the time I listen to it, I'm reduced to tears.
Plans fail every day. I want to hear you say you love won't believe it. Your eyes ain't deceiving. Fears will soon fade away. Smile now, don't be afraid. All I want to do is to spend some time with you, so I can hold you.
I used to have this terrible premonition that Chris would never grow old because he had nowhere to go, you know. He had no way out, and I just couldn't project him into, you know, into growing to the age I am now because he just had no way to survive into the future.
It was like a shooting star. It was just something that was, it had its time and it was gonna out. But sure as hell didn't make it any easier when it happened.
So I can hold you.
We would just talk, and it was usually me saying, now don't worry about this, or why don't you go in this direction and do something, like I said, more normal, just because I just saw him frustrated and unhappy, I felt like. And we'd have some conversations about religion, and I know y'all did too. I mean, Christopher was a very spiritual person, and talking to me about going to heaven and saying, by the grace of God, that's the only way you go to heaven.
That Chris died, I was in bed. All of a sudden, I just sat bolt upright in the bed. I had this overwhelming feeling that somebody was in the room. You know, I expected to encounter a burglar or something, and there was nobody in there at all. And you know, I looked over at the clock, and as I recall, it was about 1:30 or 1:35. which was the exact time of Chris's crash. And I've never had anything like that happen in my life before or since.
I feel almost guilty sometimes talking about the music part of it because it wasn't my thing. I can't help it. I kind of resent it because it makes me sad. I mean, I'm happy for him, but
You'd rather have him instead of having the music out there. Yeah, I know. Sure.
But I'll try again.
I had heard one night on the radio somebody talking about all of these different rock and roll people who died at the age of 27. And, you know, there was Hendrix, I believe, there was Joplin, you know, just a long string of people that died at 27, and they included Chris Bell, a big star. You know, it's like he just kind of walked into a template for a rock and roll legend in a lot of ways.
If you look at what happened with the Big Star records, in 1976, I would have told you nothing will ever happen further about it. The first rumblings that we heard that something was up and that there was this cult following building were not coming from the United States, they were coming from the UK and Europe.
But talk to you.
I spent some time in London in 1978. I'd pick up a Melody Maker or a New Musical Express, and there'd invariably be something about Big Star, whether it was just a mention of Alex or whether it was a band in an album review and they compared them to Big Star, or whether it was somebody back in the kind of classifieds looking for some place to buy a Big Star album.
Then I had somebody call me up and say, did you know that EMI had leased #1 record in Radio City and that they had put it out in England as a double gatefold vinyl?
I think particularly in Scotland, it's like a nuclear bomb hit, and you know, they were such an influential band, so many groups.
I was sort of hanging out with the guys from Primal Scream and Alan McGee and people from the Glasgow Scene. They were all fans of the Big Star albums.
I think kind of in the 90s, it's like it was established that Big Star were great.
It'd be one of those kind of bands like someone would say, you've never heard Big Star? And by then, you know, you've heard like 20 records that are actually influenced by Big Star.
This next song is by a mutual favorite band of ours, Big Star.
I mean, it's a cult hit all around the world. You know, some people have never heard of Cheap Trick. You know,
they don't even know it's us. They just know.
Yeah,
they know it's a great song.
When we do play in the street, it's a crowd pleaser.
Yeah, I'm not sure about when I felt like there was a Big Star resurgence, but it might have just been like when maybe the REM guys like talked about them. It seems like maybe Pete Buck was listening to them or something. I mean, he was a real record guy, you know. And then it seems like you started hearing Paul Westerberg talk about them.
Alex was opening for the Replacements, and I went over to Alex. I said, look, Paul loves you. I said, please go back and introduce yourself to him. And as it wound up, Alex produced a demo that got them signed to Sire.
We want people to know who Alex is, who never heard of Big Star. And it's like, it's our way of like, you know, he doesn't need our help, he doesn't want our help, but damn it, he's gonna get it, whether he likes it or not.
He was always totally grumpy about his past, you know, which is, in a way, to his credit. I mean, in some ways, I got tired of hearing him talk about how terrible Big Star was. I'm like, no, they weren't. Shut up, you know. Isn't it long enough now that you can just sort of like recognize that a lot of us like this stuff, even if we're not totally cool or whatever, you know? But I can also really appreciate the fact that he's really got that sort of burning, artistic, unsettled thing in his soul that really made him mean it.
I used to live upriver in Memphis, and Memphis has got, well, it hasn't got a lot of the things that New Orleans has. I feel a lot freer here.
You know, he made his own way and escaped his many incarnations, which I also find really fascinating. You know, he came out of the box tops and, you know, he could have been that gravel voice singer forever, but he made a new start.
For years and years, he toured with like a rhythm section and, you know, playing volare. Volare.
I know these are complex things with people, but I didn't think it served him that well to always be turning his back on some of this stuff. And in his attitude towards his own career, I think there was a certain kind of self-destructiveness on that level.
I love The Walking Dead. No, I really do.
I think he went through an evolution to get to where he wanted to be. It isn't necessarily where everybody wanted him to stay. I think there are people who would have rather him still be in the box tops and people would rather him still be in Big Star. But, you know, he was a real musician and a real artist.
Would
you mind signing?
No.
Thanks, man.
You keep buying them, I'll keep signing them.
Alex was always difficult.
Is that at TGI Fridays?
Yes.
For instance, when he reformed Big Star in '93, anyone that knew him was shocked that he did that because people asked him to. And if you ask Alex to do something, you can bet he's going to say, you know, no.
I thought it was a hoax.
Be playing tomorrow night at the House of Blues right here in L.A. Please welcome Big Star.
Hanging out down the street.
When Big Star reformed, I felt like that was it's a gratifying payback to get in touch with the many, many, many thousands of people that were touched by the music that were invisible to them, you know, who were finding Big Star records and CDs in little record shops. I'm so grateful that Jody is on the planet. In some ways, you know, I think he carries the heart and soul of what we love about Big Star. I think he was always true to something that was true to him. It was essential to him.
I thought I'd sit and write this song just for you.
Being in the band with Alex and John and Ken, wow, I've got this amazing seat to these great performances by the three of them. So it's more about the three of them, and I'm kind of a spectator back there. There's such tremendous joy in playing with Alex. You know, there would be this smile on his face that maybe it was a spontaneous smile, and maybe he realized that he was smiling, and so maybe he stopped. But Alex, I've never known Alex to do anything he didn't like to do. So he must have liked playing and performing on stage and playing that music.
The gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Today I come before you with a heavy heart for a friend of mine and a great friend of music in the world, and particularly from my hometown of Memphis, Tennessee, passed away last night, Alex Chilton. Alex Chilton, at age 16, had a #1 hit with a group called the Box Tops, a song called The Letter. And then he had a group called Big Star. Big Star wasn't well known. They did 3 albums, but Rolling Stone put all 3 albums in the top 500 albums ever produced in America. He was supposed to play at South by Southwest this week in Austin. They're mourning him. He is an embodiment of Memphis music. Hard, different, independent, brilliant, beautiful. We're lucky he came our way.
Obviously, this has been a difficult thing, and I just say, after the news on Wednesday about Alex's passing, my instinct was, well, probably cancel everything, and that was sort of the initial impulse. But after talking with Jody, it seemed like the best thing to do was to play, so anyway, just tell a little bit about the show, just so folks know tonight.
Well, I mean, a lot of people have agreed to come. We'll play some of the stuff that we always sang, but I mean, everybody, we got like Evan Dando, John Doe, Chris Stamey. I think we're going to talk Andy into getting up and playing on a song. The Watson twins, Sandra Lurka.
Mike Mills.
Mike Mills.
I've been trying to be what I should. I've been trying.
I guess REM was just getting started. I mean, I was in college still, and trying to sort out all the things you're trying to sort out in college. And we were just forming our band and just beginning to write songs and trying to figure out how to go about that. And Big Star was always a benchmark for me all my life. If I could ever make a record as good as any of the Big Star stuff, that's kind of how I felt I would be successful.
Lord, I've been trying.
They have this legendary status among musicians for sure. When people say Big Star, it's just it's not an era thing, it's a band thing. They're alone, they're Big Star. That's one of those bands like when you go Big Star, they don't go Big Star and that ilk. I've listened to those records on many, many occasions, but I've never had to sing them. You can see that a lot of time was spent making those records, and they are things of beauty, it's difficult to find a weak moment. There aren't any.
Won't you let me walk you home from school?
It all makes perfect sense now. When the artist is in the shadows, that's the stuff that people actually want to go and hear. And Big Star has joined that club.
They've only made these 3 records, and there's a different lineup with each album and a different kind of approach. The thing that holds the band together, I suppose, is trying to express something melancholic and something exuberant. These kind of 2 extremes.
Well, there's 2 separate dreams that have always been in my head. There was a dream of really putting out the best record you could, and it was just like you wanted to, versus some other dream, which would be being commercially successful about it. I thought about the former dream a lot more than I ever thought about the other dream.
I see sadness in your eyes.
It has been said that art should create the sense that time has stopped. Big Star transcended normal escapist pop convention by creating music that somehow froze moments that were concurrently vibrant and yet startlingly brilliant and yet oddly spent.
It was after my mother died. In this home, my brother-in-law noticed some people in the front yard taking pictures of the house. And they said, "We're from New York, and we're fans of Chris Bell.
That knocked us all out.
Having a very personal relationship to a band, and especially if a band doesn't become big commercially. They were trying to do something. They were shooting for the moon. A certain kind of purity in terms of what the music was going to sound like. It's more an idea, I think, on some levels.
It was too individual. It was too Memphis. It was unrecoupable and has never really recouped. But nevertheless, it changed music.
They were there waiting like a little jewel in the earth for me to dig them out and to find them and to appreciate them retrospectively. That to me is a great gift of recorded music.
My personal viewpoint on Big Star's story is pain transformed into beauty. Everybody suffered. Everybody feels pain. Not everybody turns that into that kind of art.
It really harkened back to real, authentic pain, real, authentic loneliness, things that would become alternative music 20 years later.
I'm not sure where we belonged, and maybe that's why I wasn't so surprised when Big Star wasn't commercially successful. But it seems to belong now.
Nighttime I go out and see the people. Air goes cool and hurrying on my way. And dressings are sweet, all the people to see. They're looking at me, all the people to see. And when I set my eyes on you, you look like a kitty. And when you're in the moon, oh, you look so pretty. Caught a glance in your eyes and fell through the skies. Glance in your eyes and fell through the skies. But mine. You said get them away. Please don't say a word. Get me out of here. Get me out of here. I hate it here. Get me out of here. At night time I go out and see the people. Air goes cool and hurrying on my way. Glance in your eyes and fell through the skies. Glance in your eyes and fell through the skies.